right, just do the thing, Greg.
All right. Welcome to Regenerated Radio. This is a very impromptu episode, kind of a bonus episode. We're not going to call it episode 9 or whatever of this season. We're just going to have this as a bonus episode. We all had our time at the Southern Baptist Convention very recently, and we wanted to drop our thoughts while the strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. And so I have with me, of course, today, brothers Lawson Harlow and Wes Russell, who is
You're the worst, Wes. Golly. I guarantee your camera's frozen. It's frozen, dude. Your camera is frozen.
That's hilarious.
On the car.
You know,
is it really?
Yes.
Actually, that's about the way that the week went, so that's fine. Well, I'm sure Wes's camera will get sorted out, but for now, you guys get to listen to him and Lawson and I as we see the wonderful IndyCar on our screen. So we wanted to make sure that we dropped in a timely manner after the Southern Baptist Convention was over some of our thoughts on some of the things that went on. It was an interesting convention. I think that's probably the best way I could describe it, is interesting. Just so many different things happened, so many different motions that went forward and movements, and the resolutions that we were going through. As we were going through all of them, all I could think was it's just such a mixed bag, and kind of a lot of status quo stuff, but I don't know. I don't want to go into it too deep right now. So let's just take it topic by topic. And we'll start with, of course, I think the crown jewel of the convention this year was, of course, the law amendment. So if you don't know, if you're not as familiar with SBC politics and things like that, the law amendment was an amendment to the Constitution that was put forward last year. It's called the law amendment because there was a pastor named Mike Law who put forward the amendment to add in, somebody may need to correct me, but basically the phrase that into our Constitution. It's already in the Baptist Faith and Message that the office of pastor is limited to qualified men, but that phrase was essentially going to be added into our Constitution, which would have added a lot of clarity, would have provided a lot of direct instruction to entities who are having to deal with those things. And that passed with 81%, I think, last year of votes in New Orleans? No, Anaheim. Right? Anaheim?
No, New Orleans.
I don't know what I'm thinking. Sorry. And then this year, of course, when we got down to the nitty gritty of it and had the vote, 61% of messengers voted for it, but unfortunately, it needs a supermajority both years of 2/3%. And so it failed by about 700 messengers. And so, that's the real gist of it. We all obviously are very much for the law amendment for a lot of different reasons, but I'll just kick it off to you guys with what thoughts do you have about that whole deal, from the actual institution of what it was to the way that the voting panned out.
Wes?
Well,
go ahead.
So I am not as black-pilled as I thought I would be from it.
Yeah.
I was very shocked. And just to have a completely transparent bad brain Wes moment, I for like 35 seconds thought it passed because I forgot that we needed a supermajority.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, but other than that, so 61.3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it ended up we needed like 695 or something like that extra votes for. Here's my big takeaway from it. I think that if this was not same way that I think that if Tom Askell was getting voted on in New Orleans, he would have won. But instead we were in Anaheim. I think that if this was voted in Dallas next year, we would have had 70%. That's my main takeaway. I tend to always blame stuff on them having the Southern Baptist Convention in states like California and Indiana that are not Southern, nor have very many Southern Baptist churches at all. But I understand there's only so many cities. That's my main takeaway. My second takeaway from it is the platform is not as powerful as I have given them credit for in the past. And let me explain this. Last year, when they didn't have time to go after it, we got 80%. And it with people's just actual convictions of what they believe in their conscience, it passed with 80%. And people can call me conspiracy theorist all I want, but the platform threw everything they possibly could at defeating the law amendment.
No, I agree.
J.D. Greer, Ed Litton, Steve Gaines. I could go on and on and on about the past presidents who literally stood up last year and tried to stop it from happening. They threw millions of dollars at it with email campaigns and, going around to different churches. NAM was pushing against it. IMB was pushing against it. ERLC was pushing against it. They threw the gauntlet at it, and it earned them like 16.5%. And I think that's what a joke. Like, I genuinely think that. I think that even though it did not pass, and it's sad that we can't be resolved on such a simple issue, I just really am not impressed with how much firepower they put behind it and how little they gained.
Sure. I mean, even before the convention happened, there was a NAM dinner, right? They had. I'm not able to be there, but they had 300 or 400 people in this dinner, and of course they got up there and spoke against it there. Which I think that's one of the things that's irked me the most, actually, of all the things that went on around that time, was that there's an entity that is speaking directly against an amendment that had 81%. The year before, as far as they knew, nothing had changed. Well, you understand what I'm saying. It had 81% the year before, and they were up there speaking against it, using the funds that we give them to put on this dinner. And that just seemed to be somewhat of a conflict of interest to me. And it was just frustrating, but I think you're right. Ultimately, it could have been much worse. And I do think that it's important for us to remember that, like, we are still very much, there's all these headlines that have been coming out now. It's like Southern Baptists reject ban on women pastors and things like that. It's like, well, hold on. We very clearly voted out FBC Alexandria in the middle of this convention with something like 91% of the messengers voting to kick them out. Now, what these other 9% are doing is beyond me, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, we're still very much a complementarian convention, but it's just we're trying to figure out, like, why not now to shut the door on this thing. So y'all keep talking. I gotta take a phone call.
No, you're good.
You're fine, man.
I've got a couple of thoughts, and I wasn't there when I voted, and honestly, I voted for that, and then I voted for US, and I was like, all right, I'm out, because I needed to get home. I wanted to tuck my kids in bed. So I have a couple of thoughts. The first one on the law amendment is something that I originally was like, okay, that's probably wise, and then as kind of on the way home, I thought to myself, that may have been a really bad call. And that was when Mike Law spoke to it and then instantly called the question.
Yeah.
The only person who spoke against the amendment was frankly far more reasonable than I think other people who were going to speak against the amendment. So the guy speaking for the amendment, or speaking against it, was pretty much just saying, we don't need this. We just voted someone else out. We don't need to be, it was, to me, I've got strong opinions on someone who says we don't need the amendment that provides clarity, but that's a different animal. But I think if you would have had some other people speak against it specifically, like I wanted to speak to it, and was in line and wanting to do that. Can y'all hear my son crying in the background?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So can you now? He's big loud. Okay, sorry. I'm assuming my wife will get him in a minute. But anyway, if you would have let if you would have let somebody who was going up there to say we don't need this amendment because we don't need to hinder women who have a desire for pastoral ministry, if you would have had one or two of those people walk up and speak against the amendment, I think you might have swayed a number of people who were sitting there saying, we don't need this amendment because we're already complementarian. Because they would have I think they would have seen, wait, there are people who are trying to get in the door. Yeah. And this all kind of was an argument of like this isn't really an issue inside of the Southern Baptist Convention. And the 91% vote, I think, actually clarified two things. One, yes, we really do have a hard line here, and it's a good line. It is shameful that there's that many people who would permit them, not saying, hey, we've got women who are serving in a on staff or something like that, but dogmatically arguing for the ordination of women and saying that they had been doing it for 40 years. And so I think that was one thing. And that may be the most regrettable portion of that. Is as bad as I wanted to speak to it. Hindsight, I wish there would have been more people who were able to speak against it, so as to show their own intentions. Like if Dwight McKissick would have spoken for that amendment, it would have failed. It would have succeeded. I think if Dwight McKissick went up there and made his big bolstering arguments on why women can be in ministry, I think that the Southern Baptist Convention would have said, "All right, boys, let's close the door."
Yeah, I also think I think JD was up at Mike 6. I think that if he would have spoke against it, I think it would have been a good thing. I think it would. I think Bruce's presidency shows that JD doesn't have as much pull as we thought he did.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, my internet kicked me out. I'm trying to make sure I don't freeze as bad.
No,
you're good, bro. You're good.
This is a bonus episode, so we're all in and out. It's fine.
Is it better? Is this like?
Yeah. No, you look
much better. Much better.
I didn't realize I had mine. I had this on 4K. Like I had my.
Oh, that's funny.
So I try to drop the res quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. One more thing that I was going to mention is that I think people think the presidency is more important than a faith and message change, and it's totally not.
Yeah.
I think 2,400 less people voted on the law amendment than they voted on the presidency. And I don't know if people just don't understand our polity, but like the president literally only has one job, and that's to put people on committees. Yeah. And changing our Baptist faith and message is like an actual binding year-to-year thing.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of aggravated me as well. And I may have the numbers wrong on that, but that was the only other thing I would add on the law amendment.
No, you're right. It was definitely more. And, I think people hear president and they just naively just jump at that one. And if they're not really in tune with what's going on and have read up on things like the law amendment or, what we'll talk about next with financial transparency concerns, like they're just not going to really care to vote on those things as much.
Yeah.
And, it's indicated by the fact that this is my first convention that I've actually been able to be at. I've been following it very closely and working with people for, 5 or 6 years now. But this is the first one I've actually been able to be at, just personal matters getting in the way in other years. And what struck me the most was just watching people just get up and leave, frankly, during kind of important moments. I don't think they realize it's important. And just some of the reactions that people have to certain things. So yeah, it's frustrating, and also just the very fact that, there's 10,000 messengers, and we think that's a lot of people. And every year you go, man, it's this huge convention. There's so many people walking around, but like we have 50,000 churches, and each one of our churches can send multiple messengers depending on various factors. Like I had 6 people for my church there. And where is everyone? We're trying to make pretty significant changes to these things. And where are you? So that's frustrating.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lawson.
No, you got it.
Yeah. One quick thing. I learned a new term called normies this week, and I'm totally going to use it, like the SBC normies.
Yeah.
That just kind of write a check and send it. And, we're going to have every conversation with everyone to not do that.
Right.
Because if all 50,000 churches were represented at the Southern Baptist Convention, the law amendment passes 95%.
Overwhelmingly.
Oh,
easily.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah. That was all I was going to say is about that ratio of people coming. I know we have CBL doing some things like that, and the law amendment guys did that, but we're just going to end up, someone's going to have a grassroots push to get the actual populace there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that the law amendment did to me, specifically did to me, was it took me from I'm going to talk on Twitter to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And I think that probably a very large number of men my age need to realize that our fathers are about to be done fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Our fathers are about to be done fighting, and we need to ask the question, who's going to take a step into that role? And we also need to remember that it's not just the Al Mohler types that are important, right? Al Mohler, when all is said and done, is actually one vote.
Right.
Now, is he uniquely important and likely swaying and persuading other people? Of course he is. But it really does. Like, when all is said and done, you know, Wes, this is kind of one of the platforms that you ran on as second VP, was like rural church pastors is like, this is the majority of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the majority of us are pastoring churches that are 200 or less, and we have responsibility to shepherd the people directly in front of us and those that we have influence over. And we need to stop. We need to stop with the idea the platform has the voice, the people have the voice, and we need to be willing to go up to a mic and to actually speak. I'm going to be honest with you. I was terrified. I'm shooting you straight. I was terrified to speak in that room for a number of reasons. The primary one was I just didn't want to sound like an idiot. Which I am predisposed to do. And in the midst of that, it was really Al Mohler the night before that just made me be like, I am going up to that. If I say nothing, it's irrelevant. I'm walking up there, and if I have the opportunity, I'm going to say my piece about the law amendment, because it's time to put money where mouth is.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's a lot more of that needs to be picked up on. Like, we need to be willing to speak, like in our last couple of podcasts, right? We need to be able to speak about Christ as prophet, priest, and king. We need to be able to proclaim theological and doctrinal truths. We also need to be able to stand up and say, no further, and to be able to hold ground where our fathers did that. They held ground. They said, we're not going anywhere. You know, I came out of Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary in Memphis, which, despite, I think, maybe what it is today, historically, it flows out of a guy named Gray Allison, who was one of those men who said no further, who was a part of the conservative resurgence. And man, I grew up with just a deep reverence and respect for him. And I mean, I was going to name one of my children after him. But now it's like, no. You are now the fighting age male.
Yeah.
Take a step up, make the arguments. And if you lose the battle, get up and do it again.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think both you and I both had speeches prepared. I was standing at a mic, but I had no chance.
I was standing at a mic, and clearly I had no chance either. The
Yeah,
guy in front of me was just about to be called, and then Mike called on it.
Yeah. To be fair, what Mike said in his speech was substantially the same as what I was going to say.
Same.
So I was pretty,
the only thing that I had in mind that he didn't have in his was the statement on loving our sisters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I hope. Yeah, I won't go any further on that. But I agree with you, Lawson. We keep coming up with the same kind of idea that we would need to recognize that there, in fact, other people are recognizing this too. It's not just in the Southern Baptist life. Actually, broadly speaking,
it's everywhere.
Evangelicalism, our fathers, to use your term, are dying. They're just they're leaving us, and it's time for us to step up and actually take the torch and move on. And it's unfortunate, we were talking about this kind of in the pre-show a little bit, but it's unfortunate that like some of the issues that they fought against, all we have to do is slam the door and, like you said, say no more, and we haven't quite been able to do it. And I know that that's frustrating. I mean, if you were at the 9 Marks at 9 event the night before the law amendment failed, I guess, then you saw Al Mohler get truly emotional. He loves this convention. Just say what you want about that man. He loves the Southern Baptist Convention with every fiber of his being. And it came out, and all he could say was, don't mess it up. And I feel like there's so many people like that are having that same kind of recognition now at this point in their lives, that I've got no more fight left in me, or very little fight left in me. And you guys have to do it. And and it's unfortunate when we don't.
That's what I think is somewhat sad. I do think there's a gap. I think there's a gap between the Al Mohlers and I'll unapologetically say in our generation. When I'm saying that, I mean anywhere from late 20s to maybe early 40s. There's a pretty large gap of passivity between the Al Mohler type and age and generation and where we are. I don't know if it's a a passivity that kind of came from, hey, we already won this battle, and this kind of idea where we don't have to continue fighting or anything like that. But I just think it's so necessary for us to say we have to pick this up, and we have to pick it up for two reasons. The first reason we have to pick it up is because those men deserve rest. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but those men deserve rest. I sat behind Al Mohler actually in the final session before that 9 Marks at 9 on Tuesday, and he was sitting there with his two grandsons and granddaughter, and then to have him make that strong appeal at 9 Marks at 9, which if you weren't there for that, then I think you missed a point of transparency in him that I had never seen. And he simply made that really grand appeal to don't mess this up. But if you think about it from a man who's fought for years and decades for the purity of something, like, it's reasonable for him to have the appeal of, please don't mess this up. I have spent my life fighting and bleeding so that this particular convention would go on in fidelity. Then it's perfectly reasonable for him to look out on a crowd of likely the vast majority of 28 to 40 some odd year old men and tell them, please don't ruin this. Like, pick it up and go to war. And that's really what I felt like happened. I felt like an appeal was made from Al Mohler to children. I mean, I couldn't even think of a better way to say it. To men who are half his age, who I think actually do have responsibility to pick up and to fight for the purity of the convention. But when he made that appeal, the thing that got me so, I mean, I almost brought me to tears, was that as he was making that statement, he instantly put in my mind my own son. That when I'm Al Mohler's age, likely, not even necessarily likely, definitely not sitting on a stage at 9 Marks, that when my son is of age to stand in that room and to fight, I don't want him to have to fight this one. I want him to know that the battle has already been won, the door has been closed, and now he can fight for deeper levels of purity, knowing that the most basic level of just, this is what the Bible says, he doesn't have to do anything about that. He simply has to say, hey, our fathers won this fight, and they were kind enough to us to slam the door closed, so we don't have to think about this one anymore. We can simply say, this is what the Bible says, and if you reject that, then you are not welcome inside of this convention. And they can continue not only to fight for purity, but also to just simply make the good, glorious conquest of life in the proclamation of the gospel that the Great Commission gives us. And so, yeah, sorry, that may have been a little bit long, but those are my thoughts.
So I thought about what Mohler said in light of my daughter.
Yeah.
And how joyful it is to be a dad to a girl in a world that just hates women.
Yep.
And not the liberal way. I'm speaking of the feminists are the ones
for sure,
who hate the women.
Yep.
But I thought about what he said, and just it kind of made me emotional witnessing him. I was watching this on a live stream from someone's iPhone. The 9 Marks at 9 this year was slam packed, standing room only.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get in there. But I'm watching this from this live stream, and he starts getting a little choked up, and you can see, for the first time I think ever, we thought that Mohler didn't have any thoughts in his head, like he was just, there was like a traffic jam in there or something. And I mean, he was just kind of emotional, and I started thinking about Myra. And was just like, am I willing to leave her a convention that's going to simp for her in a way that's harmful, that's going to...
Oh, he dropped.
Oh, well.
Painful.
Yep. I hear him, though. I agree. Like, your point, Lawson, within your speech that you had prepared about loving our sisters well by not allowing them to put themselves in that kind of position was very helpful. He's back.
Yeah. Anyways, basically what I was saying is my daughter going to have a Southern Baptist convention to where she has an extra burden of masculinity dropped on her shoulders that God hasn't built for her to carry. And honestly, I mean, I wasn't with you all when the law amendment failed. I know, Greg, you were with your church. Lawson, you were with your church. And I was with the CBL guys, and I don't know if they want me telling everybody that it's nothing confidential, but we're all standing there. I think it's William Wolf, Jeff Wright, myself, Dusty Devers, and Landon Douglas, just that group of radicals. And they just had this blank stare on their face. We all did. I mean, I did. We just had this blank stare on our face. And leave it to Dusty. Like, Dusty was like, if you're going to stay, we start fighting now.
Accurate. Right
now. He said, we meet tonight and we figure out how to get more people here. A, B, C, D. And I appreciate Dusty for being that guy. He's always that guy. We know that.
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't miss a beat. I mean, you guys have seen him stand there.
Yeah.
With his clear glasses. And he just said, if you're going to stay, nobody had even been talking about leaving.
Right.
And we were silent. We were speechless. And he said, if you're going to stay, we start fighting now. And I didn't have time to be like, I'm leaving. I didn't have time because thankfully Dusty was like, no, we fight now. And I just kept thinking about Myra and how many ever other daughters that I have. No. I want them to be a Southern Baptist. I want them to be a part of the biggest mission engagement in the history of the world. But the Southern Baptist Convention I want her to leave the one I want to leave her is the one that sees her for who she is, a lady created in the image of God, equal before Christ at the judgment throne, but is the weaker vessel and does not deserve to have this extra burden placed on her that she is to lead and not remain silent. And I want our daughters, and I want our, from now forward, regardless of what age the ladies are, to finally be able to shed off this extra weight that egalitarians and third wave feminists have put on them. That not only can you be a preacher, that's just the first step. The next step is you have to. No, these are the ones who have to do it.
Yep.
So I did not know that. I'm not on social media, so I don't know if you were talking about it on there, Lawson. I know some friends have sent me good tweets of yours, but I thought about Myra and I've been on this big kick. She's a year old. I've been on this big kick about like, I hope I have 15 more girls. I've always wanted a boy so I can keep the Russell name going, but I don't even care about that now that I've had Myra. Keep giving me girls, because godly women in society is way more important than the name Russell continuing.
Yeah.
And so, that was my first thought when I listened to Mueller say that. I was like, man, I can't just go home and leave.
Yep.
I can't. And here's another pragmatic thing. I can't just leave the biggest pot of evangelical money to liberals.
Nope. Agree. I think that's part of it. It's like, I'm not doing it. I want to read, Wes, if it's okay. I want to read my second argument for the law amendment, because I think it's appropriate here.
Yeah.
Which is, so this was the second half of what I was going to read. But that the law amendment reaffirms our love for our sisters in Christ. In affirming the law amendment, we make it clear that we will not allow perverse men and false teachers to entice women to sin against God and endanger their souls by taking up the office of pastor while remaining in friendly cooperation with our convention. I think we kind of play this game like these men aren't dangerous. These people who are enticing women to take up this mantle are not dangerous men. They're not placing our daughters in peril, but they are. They are placing them at peril. And that's what I think we really have lost, because we don't understand the word love anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like we're like, no. Just live in harmony and live at peace. Like, hey man, I'm not going to live at peace with you if you're trying to get my daughter to take up something that God has forbidden for her. Like I will not live at peace with you. And because of that, I'm saying that not only should we pass the law amendment because we don't want these people coming in and being disobedient to God, but secondarily, I don't let, forgive me, this may be a triage. You can talk to Chris Bold about triage, but like I don't let Mormons in my house. I don't let Jehovah's Witnesses in my house. You can stand at the front door and you can deal with me. I'm not letting you in the house to talk to my family, to grab my wife and to grab my daughter over my dead body. And in the very same way, a woman who comes in and says, I'm a pastor, is like, hey, I want to talk to your daughter. No.
Yeah.
With absolute resolve, no. Because you're not going to lie to her and tell her that she is not valuable based upon the roles and responsibilities that God's given her unless she usurp the authority and the roles that God has given specifically to qualified men, not just men in general, but qualified men.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. The 9 Marks at 9 event before the day before the law amendment vote, Dever implied, or not implied, he directly said that he thinks that egalitarianism really in our day, it's approaching, it's still a second order issue, but it is approaching first order. And Mohler was going into some of the theological implications of it and recognizing that this is actually a doctrine of God issue at the end of the day. And it's ultimately a really problematic thing. And it's something that I would agree, like you really need to take active steps to protect people from it. So.
Yeah, I know we need to say that. We need to move on. But the thing that I found to be so unique was Al Mohler's, who is the father, for lack of better terms, of the modern theological triage, saying like literally Dever starting to talk about it being a second tier issue, like he moved from it being a third tier to a second tier. And Mohler really looks over at him and seemingly is like, no, raise it. Like it. But if you think about it from the perspective of where God has spoken so incredibly clearly, like there is no debating, I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. The text in 1 Corinthians says, as in all the churches, the women are to remain silent. There's always this argument. They're like, oh, well, that's just cultural. It says as in all the churches. And it's not. He's not referring to Corinth. He's referring to all of the churches that he's written to. And we need to remember that Timothy was written to Ephesus. Yeah. Like these are not debatable issues, and when we believe or present them as if they are debatable, then we really are just simply saying, either God wasn't clear or it's not authoritative, and either one is perverse.
Yeah, and not just to bring the creative order in general, but Paul argues in Ephesians from creation. Not on the pastoral issue, but over the headship issue. Yep. And when he ties it to creation, one of the main issues about this is this is the ultimate but my feels.
Yes, sola feels.
Yeah, sola feels. That's good. And it's just incredibly clear. I'm going to do a quick segue here into financial transparency.
Cool.
But another thing that's extremely clear is the fact that any organization as big as ours that doesn't provide even half a 990 is crazy. And that has fought it for so long. You remember it used to be, how in the world can we make a motion to have a third party forensic audit done? And then they figured out how to squash that year after year. And then Rhett did the 990 motion, which had some red flags for some people. And me and you even argued about it through text message. I mean, it wasn't you, and you're not even against financial transparency. You were just saying, hey, here's why people are voting against it.
Yeah.
And people were surprised at the SBC that like me, you and Greg disagree on things, which is hilarious. But it wasn't a big thing, but there was a couple people who were like, Chris Bolt's tweet. Me and Chris were talking about it, and they were like, how could anyone disagree with that? I'm like, well, it's because it's just a tweet. You can't express your entire feelings in a tweet. But anyway, like me and you went back and forth over this, and then we ended up just agreeing. Yeah, it's still a weird red flag that these people will do anything to make sure that their financial business doesn't get shared. And so Rhett pulls it out, right? And were you there when Rhett, pulled it back onto the floor? Yeah. We needed a 2/3 vote to vote on it again. No, we needed I may have this backwards. We needed a 2/3 vote to bring it out, and then a majority to pass it, or we needed a majority to bring it out and then a 2/3 to pass it. I can't remember which way it goes. But I don't know about you, but that vote looked very 50-50 to me.
Yeah, it did.
And Bart said that it was overwhelmingly in the nays.
Unless the polar opposite side of the room, nobody raised the card. There's just no way.
Yeah, so I was in the very back with Jeff Dirtbin. And even he was like, oh, this is pretty even, and like in the middle, we're just kind of looking. And I'm like, oh, this will go to ballot. And he said the nays overwhelmingly have it. I think that was Bart's exact words.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like that and I wish that someone, hindsight 2020, would have ran to a mic and moved to divide the room so we could have had a ballot vote.
Yeah.
But no one did. And I don't know. I know that Greg is not here, but he had a motion that got referred to committee on financial transparency. The motion that I made was actually motivated by financial transparency. And what I mean by that is I made a motion that we instruct that I have it written down somewhere here. Anyway, to make available contact information, whether they need to create new contact information or just give us what they already have, for all trustees of all SBC entities, and publish it on SBC.net.
Yeah.
Which is crazy that it's 2024 and that's still not true. Like it's literally so hard to get a hold of trustees outside of Twitter. And even then it's hard. But my motivation behind that, maybe I shouldn't say this because, so many people in the SBC listen to our podcast, but my motivation behind that is, well, we can't even tell the trustees at the IMB our concerns with their concerns and vice versa. Because we don't know, unless they're in our churches or they're willing to converse with us on Twitter, we just can't get a hold of them.
Yeah.
But there were,
what's interesting on this, Wes, the church member that I spoke to, who is a trustee of the IMB, he said the number one thing we need is for the trustees to be more accessible.
Okay, cool. Yeah. See, so I don't know. I know it's financial transparency, but it's also it's just overall accountability.
Yeah.
That I couldn't imagine not having my contact information on our church website, let alone, like, we still do a bulletin, like a weekly newsletter that you can pick up. My cell phone number's on that. Like, I don't even put my office number, my cell phone number. And like crazy people could come in and get my cell phone number, but I want my neck stuck out that far for the people I serve and
your town.
Yes,
exactly.
Like,
yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's, Greg, what was your motion?
My motion was financial transparency. My motion was specifically directing the executive committee to release all of its financial details regarding legal matters and legal retainer and all the money that they spent on all of that kind of stuff. It was really just one in a litany of motions that were there for that express purpose of trying to encourage more financial transparency. And they all got referred, but at least maybe next year we'll see what comes of that if they decide to do anything with it. But I don't know.
One of my favorite motions that was made was give me the oral records of the oral arguments from cases. I want those so bad. Because when it all comes down to it, like, the money matters, but the arguments that these people that are making on behalf of the SBC matter a whole lot.
Think of Nam and McRaney and some of the terrible verbatim arguments that they gave, that they basically framed themselves to have. They basically created a legal posture in a court by arguing that Nam was the umbrella in which all of the SBC is under.
Yeah.
Which legally, and that was a Supreme Court case, I can't remember if that was. I can't remember what case that was. I need to shut up. But they argued that in a court of law, like you said, Lawson, the oral arguments matter. How are you arguing this? Yeah, there were tons of good motions made, and people were bringing the absolute heat this year. And I don't know if you noticed, there are very few motions ruled out of order.
Yeah, it's true.
Normally, people are up there, you know, I move that we chop Bart Barber's left foot off and hang it from the, it's just crazy stuff. That's like, guys, you just tweet it,
Right,
just tweet it,
Did we talk about the motion to remove Calvinism from the SBC yet?
No, we didn't.
No, dude, my wife was watching because she wanted to see if I got any of my motions across.
Yeah.
And she was cracking up. And you know the meme where it's just like, are you two friends? And they're just like, yes, no. And it said Presbyterians to Southern Baptist friends. Are you two friends? And it said Reformed Baptist, yes. Non-Reformed Baptist, no. I wanted so bad to go to a mic immediately after and say, I make a motion that the same thing, just replace Calvinism or Reformed theology with Arminian. I want to
amend the motion.
I would like to
amend this motion.
Yeah, so yeah,
that'd be amazing.
It just, I don't know. Maybe that guy was a plant by David Allen.
Yeah, there you go.
You know what I mean? Because I couldn't believe that I voted for David Allen in a runoff this year.
Yeah, I know, right?
I couldn't believe it.
Yep.
But no, we did not talk about that. We also did not talk about the motion that guy made about putting together a task force to study the seminaries or something, and if they are teaching a plurality.
That was the same motion.
No, there was one about plurality of elders.
Plurality of elders.
Oh yeah. Okay,
I talked to that guy like 4 times to that week. That's his thing. Like, as covenant theology is to Greg Kite, plurality of elders is to this man. I mean, this dude, I guarantee you, if he's preaching on like Moses, this dude's like, and you know what Moses could have really benefited from here? Another elder.
Well, he got some.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep it going here. So we talked about financial transparency.
Presidential election is where we technically are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the presidential election was, I mean, I think most of us were rooting for Jared, for Mr. Moore. But I think we all talked about it beforehand. We knew that it was such a long shot.
He did better than I thought he was going to do.
It's true. He did.
He
actually did much better. And you know why? It's because he actually came across very well in that presidential forum, and most of his interactions that he's had recently have been very I don't know. He's very statesman, and he's spoken well without kind of outing himself as too radical or something. He's come across really well in his interviews. So that goes a long way. It really does.
Yeah, and I think that Mike Keybone absolutely just ripping into him when all Jared did was ask a question. There were people who were around me and Chris Bolt who were rooting against Jared. Like, you could tell by their demeanor anytime Jared would get the mic. And they that loosened all of that group up towards Jared when Jared was like, I just asked a question. I don't know if you guys were there that night because it was at the same time as 9 Marxist 9.
Yeah, I wasn't.
But yeah, he asked David Allen if we were going to have a database, and Mike just blew up on him and was like, don't assume motives. And Jared literally picked his mic up. He's like, I just asked David a question. I wasn't assuming and like the whole room you could hear was like,
yeah.
But no, Jared did much better. He didn't come in last, which I'll be honest, with 6 presidential candidates, and Jared being from such a remote part of the country, in East Tennessee, and being as vocal as Jared is, like, and listen, that's just who Jared is. And if you know Jared in person, he's gonna bring the heat. And I was thrilled that he pulled, out of 6 people, he pulled 11% of the room, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's, I mean,
well, and so what happened here too, I think everyone was kind of shocked that there was the sixth guy came out of nowhere, this Dan Spencer, and yet he continually pulled all of these votes out of a hat. I don't know where he came from. I couldn't tell you who he is. I knew what church he was from. I'm somewhat familiar with the church, but I don't know. He came out of nowhere, and in my head, it's like, okay, we're going to vote for Jared this first one because we know, and we knew it was going to go to a runoff. It would have to. And it would have to with some of the stronger candidates. And so I had it in my head pretty clearly, like before the convention even started, I'll vote for Jared. And when inevitably it goes to a runoff and Jared's not in it, unless by the grace of God he is, then I'll vote for David Allen. And that's exactly what ended up happening. But over and over again, this Dan Spencer guy kept getting more votes. And so David Allen was beat out by, 23 votes, I think, to get into the last runoff by these two men. So yeah, it was an interesting thing to see this relative unknown person come in through. And I would have been really interested to see what the results would have been from a David Allen, Clint Presley runoff. But
yeah,
my hang up on David Allen was the comment that he made about the Nicene Creed.
Oh my gosh!
Like, I'm gonna be like, the moment he said that, I was like, brother, I don't know.
Like, I would even say that there's some concerning language in that.
Staggering. And so, like, when he said that, when I saw that, I was like, I don't know, boys.
I looked at Chris Bolt and I said, maybe he's talking about the word Catholic. Maybe, hopefully, maybe he's. I don't know.
I can only imagine he thinks that the phrase "one baptism for the remission of sins" is too baptismal regeneration-y. That's the only thing I can think that he would possibly be speaking to. But
yeah,
that sounds like
there was whole arguments about that on Twitter.
You just read First Peter.
Yeah, it's like that sounds like First Peter to me.
Exactly.
No, I think that. So here's what's so confusing about our convention this year. We did not vote for financial transparency, which is weird. The law amendment failed, which is weird. And then we voted in a president who's pro-law amendment.
Right, yeah.
Can someone please make sense of what in the world is going on in our convention? I just don't, because I think the only people who were overwhelmingly publicly upfront about being completely sold on the law amendment. No, I'm complementarian, but none of that.
Yeah,
was Jared Moore, David Allen, and Clint Presley.
Yeah,
and the fact that Clint Presley won the presidency
pretty handily.
Yeah, he handled it for sure, but we didn't pass the law amendment. I'm just trying to process this. I'm just trying to process how those two things work. I will say this though. I think David Allen redeemed himself with some Calvinists over the past years until he went after Nicaea. And when he went after Nicaea, I would love to know what, again, I'm not on social media. I would have loved to know what Tom Hicks had to say about this.
Oh, I didn't see anything from him on that.
Not about the presidency. No, I didn't see much about that either.
Yeah, I would have just loved to see what he had to say if he's even heard what David Allen said, that he had hesitancies of the language in the Nicene Creed. I would have loved to see Josh Summers' take on this. I would have loved to see Tom Hicks. I would have loved to see Andrew Owens' take on this. There's just some guys on Twitter that I have argued with and made fun of for having a Badger in their name.
Big Badger guys.
Yeah, I would love to see what they were saying. But
I mean, Greg's the chief Badger, so.
Oh my gosh! Look, it was annoying. I'll just put it that way.
All right, abolish the
ARLC. And I love Matt Emerson, great guy. And I ran into him in the hall, the exhibit hall with OBU, and he's out there doing his thing. And he asked me, he's like, do you think we're going to pass Nicaea in this? And I was like, I didn't have the heart to tell him at the time. Like, look, I actually do have some hesitancy, not about Nicaea at all, but simply about the process and the whole procedural thing. Which that's reasonable. That's pretty much what everyone.
You should not be able to vote in one fell swoop.
What'd you say?
You should not be able to vote in one fell swoop,
right?
To change a confession of faith. I don't care what you're adding. You should not be able to do that.
Also, are we going to add in the Apostles' Creed? Are we going to add in Are we going to add in all the creeds?
You want to add in The Athanasian Creed.
I'm going to make a motion next year to add in the Second London Confession of Faith just into
The whole thing.
No. I'd like to strike the entire Baptist Faith and Message and amend it by adding, and then read the entire 1689 to the entire.
I love it. All right. Well, so I think we're broadly pretty pleased. I don't know. Like I'm ambivalent towards Clint Presley. I think he could do a good job. We'll see.
Third best option, boys. Third best option.
I'm hopeful for Clint Presley, by the way. I really am.
I hope they don't.
And it's not just because he sounds like me.
I'll say this: for all the junk that Bart has had to deal with and all the flack that gets thrown his way, that man, I would vote for him in perpetuity as moderator of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah, moderated. His moderating ability.
He's incredible at it.
Yeah, so, you have to realize, like, there's a lot of people who Bart has not been friendly with on a public arena aspect. Yeah. And he didn't let that get in the way at all. Yeah. No muted mics. You remember anytime we were talking about plagiarism in Anaheim, Ed Litton would literally say, no, we're not doing that here. We're not. And it's like, no, you don't get to do that, buddy. You're the moderator.
Yeah.
And Bart honorably removed himself during the censor, and he had the ability to not let that come to a vote. He had the ability as chair to say, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
But he let a motion to censor him come to the floor and removed himself.
Yep. And I think Jay Atkins coming up there, and no offense to Jay, like, this is not an easy job, but doing such a not great job during that portion, it just showed how much better Bart was.
He made me laugh though.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move forward then to this motion to abolish the ERLC. Tom Askell comes up, and I guess the third year in a row now that we've had this exact motion to just writ large, just abolish the entirety of the entity of the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission. Now, again, if you've been following along with all the politics around that, you understand why that's the case. The things that they've spoken against when they should have spoken for it, or the things that they've spoken for that they should have no business speaking for. It's been a very rough history for the ERLC in the past few years. And of course, there's things that they do that are good, I'm sure, but it's so outspokenly bad that Tom went through whenever he was making his motion and kind of laid out some of the major problems, particularly the one that radicalized me. I think I made a meme that went viral on that. I was radicalized by the ERLC whenever they shot down by writing, as part of that letter that went of all the pro-life organizations that went to the legislature of the Louisiana House whenever they were going to put forward the bill to actually abolish abortion, actually outlaw it in the state, and that letter caused that not to come to fruition. So that's the biggest one. But anyway, there's a lot more to the ERLC debate than just that, but that is a significant part of it. So Tom Askell presented his motion to abolish the ERLC, and honestly, I was shocked that it came to the floor again this year, but it did come to the floor again this year, and it looked to me from where I was standing like 35-ish%, maybe 40% of the room actually voted yes. And
it was definitely the most it's been.
Yeah, it's growing.
I don't know about you guys, but that should send some kind of a message, like, for that many people in that room, for a room that struck down the law amendment.
You go a little bit further south.
Yeah.
You go to Louisiana.
You're dividing the room on that, at least.
Yeah, you go to Louisiana, Florida, Texas, Alabama, something like that. So
I talked to Tom a little bit about that afterwards, and we said the same thing. It's you're chipping away at it, and you see eventually the fruits of that. And sure enough, like, every year it seems like more and more people are behind this motion to abolish the ERLC. And Tom made a great point about it, that when you do this and you pass the motion, it doesn't happen immediately. You have to do it twice.
Yeah.
And that first time sends the message we want to send. And I just feel like a lot of times we're scared to send the messages that we want to send.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Go ahead, Wes. No, this is a long thing that I'm going to say. So.
One of the things that I thought about after that motion was set up by Tom, and maybe Greg, you said something to me about it, or the send the message aspect. I would love nothing more than to have that message sent and well received, and the ERLC stand.
Yeah.
And so
we
like
need the ERLC.
this is the whole thing.
We need
right?
a good ERLC.
Exactly. And so I think sending that message matters. And I think that it should be the aim of the man who sets that motion in order to come back the next year and say, I would like to make a motion to personally and to the entirety of our convention thank the ERLC for its work over the last year in its changing of its methods and desires.
Yeah.
Like, that's the aim, right? So if we're talking about it from a disciplinary standpoint on a grand scale, our goal is to see it reformed. And I would love nothing more than to see it reformed and to see it execute, I think, that which is actually morally appropriate.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do as abolitionists, of course, everybody hates us at the convention because nobody can get to a mic because we take them all. But one of the things we do is we speak for or against things that we 100% know is useless to speak for or against. We know people don't listen to us. They block us out. But our tactic is not to convince the people on stage of these things. It's not. I know that Brent Leatherwood, unless he has a pastor who's going to sit him down or a brother who's going to sit him down, is not going to repent of his apathy towards children. And I just know, I know that because of what scripture speaks about stiff-necked people. It's going to take a radical move of God in Brent's life for him to just turn. But one of the things we do is speak to these things, knowing that they're going to fail, to bring truth to bear in that room.
Right.
And over the past 6 years, specifically the past 3 years since Nashville, 4 years since Nashville, we have seen our offerings to the table get struck down and 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 struck down. But the room is overwhelmingly becoming more abolitionist because they're hearing us arguing with the entity heads, and they're hearing us argue with Brent Leatherwood and the resolutions committee, and they're thinking, wait a second, the crazy guy at mic number 9 actually just made a really good point.
Right.
And even though I know that Andrew Dyer here in my state, he's called it guerrilla warfare and all this crazy stuff. It's like, well, you're right. And we toned it back this year. I mean, people, it was obvious we toned it back, but in general, what Tom did, and we didn't invent that. I was talking to you guys. That's a whole 1980s conservative resurgence idea and Tom did not pack the mic to get that. Like I had a whole list of motions I wanted to be made, and abolishing the ERLC wasn't on my list. Like, and Tom has nothing to do with me. So, but when Tom made that, and then they brought it to the floor for him to speak on it, I think we all knew it was going to fail. And there's too many normies in the SBC. But one of the things is that Tom got to speak to it, and then Leatherwood spoke to it,
right? Yeah,
and seemed delusional. Like, I think that he hurt his case by speaking to it, and he was sitting behind Jared Burdick waiting in line. And you know how Brent is very calm and polished, and he was not. He was not. He was sitting there with tons of people looking at him, fuming from the ears, scrambling, writing things down on pieces of paper, fussing with the people who were trying to help him. And I was like, this is good. Point a camera at this. This is, and here's the thing. That was a real human being.
Yep.
Right there. But then he gets to a mic and it's like, here we go.
Yeah.
Just be a real human being. So no, that's a net positive that 30 to 35% of the people said, yeah, I think that we should abolish this.
Yeah.
Even if it was just for the memes.
Well, and later on, when they gave the ERLC report and Brian Gunter got up and he addressed him and questioned him about, well, how will we ever abolish abortion if we're not willing to criminalize in this thing? And he presented a very articulate argument. And then in the same way and in the same kind of breath, like Brent Leatherwood just dodged and went around the question. People are starting to see that, right? And people are starting to notice that, oh, well, that's not an actual answer. Like, he didn't actually get to the point. Jared did the same thing to Keith Allen. And I respect the heck out of Jason Keith Allen. Like, he's an incredible seminary president. I think he does a great job. Yeah. But Jared, particularly said, what are you going to do to support and find a way to support with materials or whatever, even just like anything. These people who are committed to the immediate abolition of I almost said slavery, of abortion, without exception or compromise. What are you using that language? What are you going to do? And we know what that means. Everyone in the room knows what that means at this point. This is an abolitionist argument. What are you going to do to support your students who are in that camp? And basically, he got dodged by Dr. Allen, whom again I love him, but he just continued to say the same sort of pro-life talking points over and over again. It's just frustrating. So.
You know, it's funny. I became an abolitionist with a single question. Somebody asked me one question. I was like, oh, wait. And it was asked to me, and then I asked it to my wife like a day later because I was still thinking about it, which the question was simple. It was, is it a just law to say that to prohibit abortion after 6 months? Like the moment that I heard that question with the banner over it of, is it just to permit a child to be murdered in the womb for 6 weeks? And it was like it was earth shattering to me. This is why I think that so many of Southern Baptists inside of that room, when you phrase that question or something like that, it is an impossible question to answer if you aren't willing to say, no, it is an unjust an unjust law. You can't answer it, and you look like a fool when you try.
Yeah. Yep. I didn't mean to make this about abolition, but we were talking about.
You're literally wearing a shirt.
Yeah, we were talking about the ERLC, so I guess
this falls into that camp.
But we have to remember that the ERLC was kind of falling before Brent took over.
For sure.
Brent was Russell's guy, but still, which was interesting because right after that we went back into resolutions, and we talked about IVF, whom the ERLC has been ghosted silence on. Ghosted. I mean, they've spent so much time on red flag gun laws in Tennessee that nobody's questioned whether the fact that they didn't even the Alabama court case with Alabama Supreme Court case to see if frozen embryos were humans. The RLC, Brent said, don't even dip your toes in that water. We're not, but Walker. So Dr. Andrew Walker, the ethicist from Southern, and Moeller, the president of Southern, wrote a pretty okay. Let me say this: an overall really good resolution, minus one word in my opinion. I've told you all about that, on in vitro fertilization and its unethical practices. I got sent a screenshot from Dr. Walker's tweet talking about we invented IVF in 1978, and there's people saying, hey, we're not ready to talk about this just yet in 2024. And he said the discourse gets even stupider. Yeah. And I was like, I love when PhDs say the discourse has got even stupider. Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, even in the abolition world, and I've been going to abortion clinics for years, and I just recently started reaching out to IVF clinics in the past year. So I'm even behind on it. What did you guys think? First of all, what did you guys think the room was going to do with that?
I thought that it would get shot down. I thought it would get heavily amended and then shot down. And to be fair, that's what somebody tried to do. There was a massive revision. Somebody got up and made probably 10 different strikes and additions to amend it. And surprisingly to me, the messengers overwhelmingly voted that down. Said, no, we don't want that. Yeah. And then I think we talked about this in the pre-show, but Monica Hall, who's from your state, and I'm sure you know pretty well, she got up and what does she do? She's like a neuropathic therapist. I can't remember. Yeah. So she does a lot of work in that regard already. And she has had snowflake babies, which, if you're not familiar with the term, is an embryo adoption, where you adopt one of the frozen embryos and have them implanted into your womb and bear them to term and birth that child, and they are your child by adoption. And it's a wonderful thing, and that more Christians, frankly, need to consider doing. If we're wanting to find ways to rescue those who are being carried away to death, because that's really what's happening there. And so I don't know. I really did think that that was a massive tone shift for the entire room too when she got up there, and it being in such juxtaposition to the gentleman who, and I do not want to disparage him.
No.
I think there's some naivety and ignorance around the issue, and that's where this thing comes from. But I think there was a lot of people who kind of cringed in the room a little bit when the gentleman stood up and said that he had 10 children on ice. And he presented that as like, I love those people and I'm looking forward to meeting them. And he presented it in that way. But I think everyone else in the room was going, brother, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And again, no disrespect to him. I'm sure it's born out of ignorance, but
see, I don't think it is born out of ignorance.
Yeah.
I want to believe the best.
He's assuming graciously.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage the guy either. I actually just want him to go adopt his kids.
Yep.
And I was behind him. Like I had been talking to him, and the tension when I was speaking against the amendment and he was speaking for the amendment. And I will not disclose our conversations, but I will talk about what he said out loud. I think him actively admitting that he knew he had 10 kids in a freezer somewhere.
That's all there is to it.
And he called them kids and he told them that they were, you know, as I would say, cryogenically incarcerated. I think that some people are like, oh, wait. So even the people who do IVF understand that this is happening. Okay. And like I said, I don't want to disparage him. There is a lot of ignorance around this issue, and Christians participate in it, not recognizing until they think through it.
Yeah.
And we also need to approach this whole subject with a repentant approach. Like, hey, repent with us. We have all used, most 99% of married couples have used chemical birth control.
Sure.
We all have, me and Elena, as an abolitionist at that time, for 2 months, used a chemical birth control that we did so much research on, couldn't find anything. And then Dusty was like, here you go. Here's the piece of information you need. And just the 2 months that me and Elena used chemical birth control, the thought of potentially, it's not a guarantee, but potentially having aborted 2 kids during those 2 months. So we're not like, we need to approach this with repentance. And Dr. Walker and Dr. Moeller did that in their resolution. They offered, you know, I think it was like the second to last resolve was like, hey, we're going to be resolved to walk beside these people who are struggling with infertility and cannot have kids. And it's like, man, I don't think it was as robust. Dusty and I put one in that was very robust. But I was thrilled that the SBC made that statement and overwhelmingly passed the resolution. And to Greg's point, I think the young man, or he's probably older than me, but the young man who walked to the mic and said, hey, I have 10 children that are frozen right now, probably clicked some people's heads and were like, oh, so this isn't an ignorance issue for him. He actually, he may be ignorant of the fact that that's an unethical thing to do, and he needs to think through that. But yeah, when I looked around the room, I was like, well, this is the biggest net positive of the entire thing. Because we can argue about women pastors and we can argue about all this stuff, and it's all wrong, and it all does harm society. Not being financially transparent looks bad on Christ as Lord, all of that stuff. But if we really want to talk about like there's 1.8 million children frozen in cryo chambers in our country that we know about. And I was thrilled to death, guys. I didn't mean to hog that time, but I was thrilled to death to.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the highlight of the convention, if I'm really being honest. And so, we've been talking about all these things. There's some good in all of this. The law amendment failed, yes, but 61% of Southern Baptists supported it, and 90% of people voted to vote out FBC Alexandria for their blatant error in that. So there's positives within it, right? Financial transparency was rejected, but a lot of the motions that were made are going forward into the committees, and they're going to have to deal with them. Clint Presley is elected. Like we think there could have been stronger candidates, but like certainly we think that he's going to be a strong candidate in a lot of ways to lead the SBC, and I'm hopeful for him. The motion to abolish the ERLC failed, but I think there's still a message that was sent from the amount of people that were there. And then this resolution is really the one thing that was a big highlight. It said an exclamation point that said, yes, Southern Baptists care about ethical issues. They care about the morality of these things, and they want to be consistent in them. And that's actually important for us as abolitionists too. Like, we want to recognize that consistency and the desire to be consistent in your moral and ethical claims. It's going to lead to more and more people saying, okay, hold on, this position over here, this kind of pro-life jargon does not make sense in light of this over here. And the more that we see that, I think the more that these things will just continue to snowball and roll. So, hopefully 3-4 years down the road, we're going to see a lot more of this stuff passing and succeeding in more clear ways. But yeah.
Good. I want to jump right into this. What was the worst sermon you heard? I know it's next on our list. Like I'm not even going to try to move that. I heard the best sermon I've ever heard at a convention this week.
I affirm.
And I heard the worst sermon. I don't
know if it's the worst.
Dude, last year's with what's the guy's name?
I can't remember who
I
did
can't remember the guy's name from last year.
I will say this. How do I say his name? Orge. So he started, and I was like, okay, maybe this will be. No, never mind.
Remember, guys, he wasn't even supposed to be preaching. He was supposed to be giving us a report.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. True story. I forgot about that. But I'm always amazed at how someone is able to both tell me how I should be a Great Commission Christian and also neglect half of the Great Commission simultaneously.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, guys, share the gospel. Yep. Don't worry about the teach them to obey all that Jesus commanded and upholding righteousness. Don't worry about those parts. Those are irrelevant. Just
worry about them and don't do them.
True story. True story.
He didn't just say don't worry about it. He mentioned that stuff, but he mentioned it in a negative light.
Yeah.
And I actually think Jeff Orge fans were disgusted by that.
Okay, so I have a story to tell about this. So
the pause on your face.
So yeah, well, let me first say that I think that generally you're right, like it should be a report, but the executive committee first half of the report I think it's just tradition that it's a sermon essentially. So I'm used to that. I was kind of expecting that, but when Orge got up there, the things that he said, I was actually going to write a whole article on this. I have like 3 pages written, and I just forget it. I don't feel like taking on that noise. But he presented 4 competing missions that he believes takes away from the primary mission in the hearts of Southern Baptists: political action, social justice, convention reform, and doctrinal conformity. And when I read those things, I look at them and say, those are good things.
Every one of them are good.
And they're things that we should be concerned with as Southern Baptists. Like, churches are the ones who enable missionaries and go forth and bring the gospel out to the nations, not the Southern Baptist Convention, this nebulous thing that exists for only 2 days a year. Right. The Southern Baptist Convention exists so that when we come together, we can speak to what we collectively believe about those 4 points.
Yeah.
Political action, social justice, convention reform, and doctrinal conformity. That's the purpose of the meeting. And he's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Focus on mission.
It always cracks me up when he's like, I'm going to preach this sermon to change your all's minds.
It's like, no, you're not.
But don't you dare try to change anyone else's mind. Don't ever try to reform this convention, but here's a sermon.
Right.
While I try to reform the convention.
Exactly.
And it's, man.
Here's the other part of the story I was going to tell you is I'm sitting amongst a bunch of people who know Jeff Orge and love Jeff Orge. And you know what? I have no doubt in my mind that he is a genuine, great guy in a lot of ways.
Right.
But a lot of these guys don't bring clarity of thought to the convention. They're singularly focused on things that they ought not to be, and it comes across as, and it may very well be, subversive, and that's frustrating. And so you continually get these same kind of sermons. This sermon from Jeff Orge was basically just a toned down version of the one who got like really red last. I can never remember his name. But
that's all right. You should call him Red Man. Call him Red Man. The thing. So like I was texting a friend of mine, a church, another pastor in our area when this guy was preaching. And I'm glad I did that because now I remember some of the things he said. I text him and I said, I feel like I preached the opposite sermon on Sunday because I preached on the conquest of Canaan.
Yeah.
Oh
but,
yeah, literally.
But one of the things that is so funny to me is this man gets up there and starts preaching, and the whole thing is like, this guy Ted, he's talking about heaven, like all of the good things that we want in the world, and places them at like they're diametrically opposed to gospel expansion. Like no one's having abortions, no one's getting divorced. The world, and like I'm like you're describing good and righteousness in the world. And for some, and then you're like, and then all of these people who have never had abortions and have been married their whole life die and go to hell. And I'm like, why do you think we want a society that doesn't recognize Jesus as Lord?
Yeah.
Like in what world? Like there's grounds that actually lead us to say you shouldn't have a divorce and you shouldn't have an abortion, and both of them are under the banner Jesus is Lord.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't understand how this is happening right now. The thing I said this man has lost his mind. He places cultural reform in such a light that makes us okay with a society that is upright but godless. Who is that? Who is he talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like
but the thing is, it's very clearly meant to be a polemic against Christian nationalism.
Yes.
And it's just one of those things where like a lot of people are just out of touch with the understanding of Christian nationalism. That's why I appreciate Tom Askell. He had his whole lecture on like, well, we need to just define the word and everyone's going to be fine with it. But apparently not, because frankly, a lot of the things that he's mentioning here are not things that he's willing to go forward with. So
yeah.
Anyway, what were you going to say, Wes?
I was going to say, like you mentioned, he's just, and there's a lot of preachers who are guilty of this. And from time to time, I'm guilty of it. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm not ashamed to bring it up right now. That you just aren't as clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's a tactic to get raws in the room. For instance, like we have three young preachers at our church, and one of them is in Bible college. One of them's going to Bible college, and one of them's not old enough yet. And not saying that's a positive thing. I'm just saying that's the path that they're taking right now. But one of the things I tell them is you can get such a reaction from mentioning abortion every Sunday, gay marriage, trans stuff, firearms, America. I can list these things, and you can get a whole bunch of amens and glories and really get the crowd going together. But is it worth it? You know, who are you preaching for, and what are you preaching for? And Orge's sermon, aside from the fact that he's preaching for himself up there, like he just rawing his own, this axe to grind. It's like, this is my thing against the messengers, as many of them get to the mic and they're like, they get their axe out that they've been grinding every year and they start chopping down that tree. It was just like Orge had it's like William Wolf had just gotten rent free in Orge's head over the past year. And just Orge was like, I'm going to rip these people to shreds, you know? And people are sitting there listening to this, and he lost the room immediately.
Yeah.
Like everybody was engaged. It was early on in the convention. And then before I realized it, I'm standing in the back looking around, and everybody's just, Twitter's going off, all of that stuff. But the best sermon I've ever heard at a convention in the past 8 years was Jimmy Scroggins' message.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Oh, you didn't hear that?
Yeah.
No.
Dude.
I was talking about Dean's that I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, me too.
So I didn't get to listen to Dean's.
I was standing during Dean's the whole time. That's when I was in line to speak to the law amendment.
That's funny. Good for you for not getting down. But it's warfare up there on those mics.
That's right.
So Jimmy Scroggins' message was this.
The Dadalorian.
His message was, I forget the text. It was 1 Timothy. I forget like the verses, but it's 1 Timothy 2 about men and who pastors were. And he's basically preaching to the pastors on how to be men. And his at the end, he got a little topical, which I'm not opposed to.
It's a convention sermon.
Yeah, it's a convention. It's an address, you know?
Yeah.
And his 3 points, he says, if you want to change the world as a pastor, number one, focus on men, preach to men.
Yep.
He said, you can strain yourself out and flatten yourself out all you want by addressing all these different people. But if you devote yourself to men in your church, or no, it was family. He was talking about if you can get the men in your family to have big families, have tons of kids. And he's like, oh, of course, the guy with 5 kids is telling you to have all these kids. He's like, no, I'm serious. Go talk to the old people in your church and ask them if they wish they would have had more or less kids. And you'll never find anyone that says, oh, we're okay with the amount of kids we had. The second one was marriage. And he talked about how you need to be like pressuring every person in your church to get married young to a good, godly person, all this stuff. And then the third one is he was like, your church needs to build schools. And he was like, they're coming for your kids. It was genuinely like Dusty Devers was up there. Like Jimmy Scroggins was like pointing with his finger all over the place. He said, if your church doesn't have a school, you're behind. He's like, you need to figure out 10 churches, a homeschool co-op, a cottage school, however you can do it, make sure there's a school to protect people from the devil in your community. And he says, if it's already started, just back that one. And he said, I know what you're saying. You're Southern Baptist. He said, don't worry. Me too. He said, I got the football coach, the baseball coach, the superintendent, and about 50 teachers in my church. And I tell them, I don't want my kids going to get taught by you. And it's like, buddy. And I was listening the whole time. I was like, is Doug Wilson preaching at this convention? Like it was phenomenal. But no, I didn't listen to Dean's. It wasn't on purpose. I've had some run-ins with Dean on Twitter, but it wasn't purposeful or anything.
Yeah.
I just had knee surgery. I've been walking 20,000 steps every day. I needed a little bit of rest, but so you guys loved it.
And Dean's was good.
Dean's was good. It was charitable, equal, if I can use that kind of term. And I think he did a good job. What normally takes place in those is everybody the people shoot at, or whoever's preaching shoots at the people who care about doctrinal precision. That did not happen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Instead, he said it matters. Yeah. And the people, and this kind of like, I have a guy who I work with at Mercy Hill who calls himself the pragmatic guy. And he's not a pragmatist. He's just pragmatic. And to be honest with you, I need that. Mm-hmm. Like I am this is true. We're going to do it. And we're going to do like there. And that's great. But I like a guy behind me that says, this is true. We're going to do it. And here's how we're going to do it so that it works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And so, like those things are important. I thought he did a good job of balancing those two things out really well. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to wrap this up, guys. It's an hour and a half in. So let's talk about one more thing. The elephant, or maybe I should just say the Indy car in the room. I think pretty much everyone, literally everyone, I talked with people that I know, I would say on the far other end of the spectrum regarding most issues from me. And literally everyone was frustrated with the IndyCar stunt that Nam pulled. Now, Wes, I think you were actually one of the most charitable people that I heard about this. Maybe it was a bundle. Maybe it was a deal.
Yeah, put your badge on. You deserve it, Wes.
Yeah, right.
Guys.
If you don't know, there was an Indianapolis, like a Formula One race car sitting in the middle, and it was branded with all the Nam stuff. It said "Fueled by Annie," which is maybe the most tone-deaf statement that I've
seen bro.
Ever.
Cringe.
And all about the gospel on it. That's the other one. Yeah, both of those things are hilarious to me because it's like all about the gospel on a race car. Okay. And but the other part of the issue is that they also gave away these little Hot Wheels. Probably, I don't know, Dad. Maybe 20,000 of these little Hot Wheels that are branded in the exact same way. I have 5 of them because they were trying to give them away at the end, and I have 5 kids. Why not? Sure, I'll take a few. They may as well go somewhere. And so, yeah.
Greg's read the room, bud. Give them over.
Ultimately, yeah, it was just very strange.
Bro, look at this. One of the guys from our church who went sent me this. Y'all ever see the aluminum crosses that are like huge on the side of the road?
Come to Kentucky, buddy.
Okay, we've got them everywhere, but here, look at this. Hold on, let's see if you can see it. The text said "Fueled by Annie."
Okay, so here's the thing. I was very charitable. I ran the Indianapolis Marathon in 2019. Humble brag. But no, I ran the Indianapolis Marathon in 2019, and that's where the Marathon Expo is. If you've never done a marathon, or if you've never done like a bigger race, not just a 5K, they have massive expo. Y'all gotta chill. They have massive expos.
Sorry, there's a side chat, and
I'm just glad nobody can see that.
I'm glad too. We're just gonna leave it.
There was an Indy car there, Wes. Talk about it.
Sorry,
I was good,
inside
bro.
jokes where like not a single listener is going to be like, "What the heck are they talking about?"
I've always loved inside jokes. I hope I can be a part of one day.
I hope I can be a part of one day. Oh, dude, I thought y'all saw it and moved on. Anyway,
no, I just saw it.
Oh man. Anyway, so they had the IndyCar there at the Marathon Expo, and that whole convention center was filled with like New Balance and Nike and Brooks and Hoka and all of this stuff. And they had the IndyCar there as well. And it had the, 2019 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon stickers and all that stuff on it. So everyone in my camp is freaking out about this thing. I said, guys, this has to be just like a package deal with the convention center that you can buy a vinyl wrap, And I was like, I'm not saying that even if it was only $1,000, I don't think they should spend $1,000 on that. I think that sometimes these entities can get so much money, they lose sight of how much $1,000 really is
for sure
for a church planter or a replanter here in America. But like that's someone's here in Kentucky, that's someone's electric bill for 3/4 of the year. That's a lot of, but I was being charitable. And then I think it was you, Lawson, who was like, no, they're giving away like miniature die-cast ones too. I was like, you're kidding me. So you all watched me. I walked around the entire NAMM thing and was like asking people what was going on. And I went over there and they showed me the die-cast thing. I said, geez, man. I said, they said, how many you need? They didn't even need verification. Sometimes they're like those Jonathan Edwards books. I was trying to get Jordan one and they're like, no, just one a person. So I'm like, oh man, how many of these you all get? And they're like, I don't know, 15, 20,000. I was like, okay, now I'm upset. Because let's say that the convention is the one who produces these things. Cause I mean, if you've looked at the box, I think that's who does it. I think they have a package deal with some die-cast company.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you spent 50 cents on those things, I'm upset.
Yeah. Right.
And I assume you spent more on it. There was a NAMM trustee who was behind me in line and was like being the NAMM spokesperson. He spoke against the legal motion for them. And I was chit-chatting with him and he's just like, he said, oh yeah. He's like, I don't care to tell you how much that costs. I was like, tell me. And then he wouldn't tell me. It's like, dude, this is why I was literally in line to get ready to speak. I was like, this is why we don't trust you all. Because you literally just said, oh, I'll talk about the car all you want. I was like, how much did it cost? Oh, I can't tell you that.
Cringe.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So the big car, I gave the benefit of the doubt. It was the little cars that sent me over the edge. Because I was like, maybe they spent $1,000 on this vinyl wrap, or maybe it was included in the package deal with the whole convention center. I don't know. But the die-cast cars, like at some point we have to stop laughing at people who talk about swag. We have to stop laughing at their swag jokes, because Lifeway, who tends to be a godless company who just publishes anybody and everybody who wants to be published and nobody good, was giving away Jonathan Edwards books. And it's like, that's a net positive. If you want to spend my cooperative program dollars on giving people solid biblical theology from probably the smartest man to ever.
Couldn't believe it was Edwards, bro.
Dude, Lawson about had a heart attack.
Lawson, I was like, wait. Who is this? You're handing me a Jonathan Edwards book? What's happening here?
Yeah. So I don't mind swag, right? Like every company, this is marketing and it's smart marketing. Founders was giving away a different booklet every day.
Yeah.
Clear Creek was giving away pins. That's where I did one semester of Bible college. They're giving away pins to people, lapel pins for people who want to. Like, okay, I don't mind you taking cooperative program dollars and marketing with them a little bit. I don't think any of us, we market at our churches, whether it's investing in candy to hand out on Halloween, or whether it's in like, it was just read the room, Nam. Like seriously, like everyone is critiquing you other than you and your trustees. And now you're
and know
giving
what.
us race cars.
Yeah, know what's who you're giving these things to. It's one thing to give a pastor a shirt and be like, "Hey, wear this shirt around because you can be proud of the institution. You can kind of explain what they do. You may even wear like disaster relief was giving away shirts. You can go
Yeah.
and wear that when you're out doing disaster relief. Like these things make sense. But like to give a bunch of pastors and even lay people, but like just people that coming to the convention for this business meeting, to give them a Hot Wheel, it's like, come on, no one wanted this, no one asked for this. It's just frustrating. So anyway,
Yeah.
we need to move forward and be done. So final thoughts on the convention. Lawson, go.
Final thoughts on the convention.
That can include
I believe that the
potential things around
convention.
it.
I believe that the convention is continually headed for. This may be a surprise to some. Is continually headed for deeper conservatism.
Mhm.
I actually believe that. I believe that based upon the votes that were given. I believe that First Baptist Alexandria was voted out louder than the churches that were voted out last year, which was incredible based upon its location. I believe that we do still need to make arguments and to put in place a closed door. We need to slam a door and call it a day and let our old guard rest, knowing that they won the battle, and close it to such a degree that they can do that. We, as fighting age males between the age of 28 and 45, 50, need to gird up and act like men. And we need to fight, and we need to be diligent, and we need to make sure that the Great Commission that's being fulfilled by the Southern Baptist Convention is actually the Great Commission given by Jesus. And finally, we need to be willing to call out those who are acting inappropriately inside of our midst and to see them removed. I hope that next year, this is really where I am. I hope that next year there is something like the law amendment set forward. And at the very same time, I hope there are 6 churches at bare minimum that are removed from our convention based upon their refusal to cooperate with us. I hope that it is that they are removed for, I hope these don't exist, but I know that they do. I hope that they will be removed for embracing homosexuality. I hope that they will be removed for permitting sexual abuse to take place without the civil magistrate being involved. And I hope that people will be removed from our convention based upon their bringing in and permitting women as pastors. I hope we have 1,000 more churches join the SBC to stand there and say, we're going to stand here with them and say, we're closing the door.
Yeah. Amen. Wes.
Yeah. My final thoughts is I'm still confused of whether God is judging the Southern Baptist Convention into death or he is continually working. And that's generally where my headspace is right now, is I just don't know. There's been so much favor that biblical fidelity has been gaining over especially the past 3 years. But at the same time, I think we'd all admit that there's those things that maybe live rent free in our head that we just can't grapple with. With that said, I have never been more invigorated to be a Southern Baptist than right now, which is crazy because last time we were on StreamYard, what was I ranting about right before we all had to leave is I don't know if I can stay in very much longer. And I mean, you guys didn't say anything about it. You guys were just listening to me rant about it. But now I'm like, no, not that easy.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
it's I know that I am personally, but also idea wise, a thorn in a lot of people in the SBC's flesh. But that's a good thing. There's people in my church who are thorns in my flesh, and I need them to continue to prick me and prod me. So it's not that bad of a thing. But with that said, like my actual final thoughts on it is if people are going to leave, where will they go? We're still the greatest association of churches to ever exist in America. And I know I sound like a platform normie guy right now saying we're the greatest, but seriously, with all of her flaws, it's a big old mess. but it's our mess.
Mm-hmm.
And to quote A Bug's Life here, and then I'll be finished. That's our lot in life. It's not a lot, but it's ours.
There you go.
You know, and that's how I feel about the SBC. Is it just, yeah, I know it has problems, but my church has problems, your church has problems, your church has problems, and I'm confident enough in Scripture, convincing hearts and minds, that I will continue to go to conventions. I'll continue to do my part. I'll continue to network locally and get conservative pastors to, like next year, we got to get a lot of people to Dallas because that's really far away from all three of us, basically. But still, yep. In tweet, full send.
And I'll wear a blazer next year.
Nice. Yeah, me too.
But Monday was nice because it was nice and cool. The other days, I was roasting.
Yeah. Well,
Craig,
my final thoughts on the convention broadly. I mean, I would just echo what you guys said mostly. I would say the one thing that I would like to continue to see moving forward is a little bit more investment from, we've been talking about this old guard and how they need to rest. And at the same time, there's also sort of new voices coming up, and there's a need for guys our age to get up and speak to things and to make motions and to do these things. I would like to see a little bit more investment from some of the older folks and mentorship and continual guidance and truly coming alongside, even if you're an Al Mohler or a Mark Dever and you're thinking, this Wes Russell guy, he's a bit of a radical, he may have some similar goals to me, but having continue to have those conversations and invest more, and let's actually like utilize the forward motion I think that we have and try to push it into getting those goals accomplished. Because ultimately, when I think a lot of the struggle has been those voices, abolitionist voices. It's a good abolitionists aren't the only. We're not the only thing to think about in the convention, and yet it's a good barometer to understand like what's happening, where you have a group who truly should be with us on 99% of things, and there's this one issue that it just like, well, we can't work with them because they're too radical, they're too crazy. No, let's have the conversations. Let's get together and actually have a unifying presence within these things. I spent the entire time on the drive home thinking about who would be people who have a spine in the next generation, but are also palatable. People who will actually be able to put forward as a presidential candidate, and the people who are normies, as you would say, would vote for them.
Learned the word. I got to keep using it.
I know, right? And I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I hope that we can find a way to bring together the conservative movement a little bit more. I do feel like it's a bit fractured. There's so many levels of norminess within the SBC, and we just need to consolidate a few so that these things can come together a little bit better. But overall, I was pretty pleased. The food in Indianapolis was fantastic, and so not much else about the city was amazing, but the food was pretty good. So it was pretty. There were some pretty parts of it. So, and then there was also some drug addicts and homeless. That's fine.
It ain't Pikeville, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, fair enough. All right.
I'm tired now.
Okay. Yeah, I know. We've been on this for like almost 2 hours. So, okay. Well, thank you all for listening to our ranting for way too long on this. I actually thought this was going to be like a 45-minute quick, like, let's just unload some thoughts, but I should have known better because it's the three of us. So, I guess I'm learning, but I appreciate you guys bearing with us today, and we'll see you in the next episode. We will not have a normal episode this coming week. I will try to release this one. Maybe I'll get it done this weekend and schedule it for Monday. So hopefully you're watching this sometime the week after the convention, but there won't be another episode in our regular series since I have youth camp and there's other things going on. We're just going to kind of decompress from the convention. So be looking out 2 or 3 weeks before you see our next real episode come forward, and be looking forward to it. But thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, bye. Okay.